What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle. Happy Wednesday. Hope you are all having a great day and getting geared up for March Madness. We will address some March Madness and college basketball topics here throughout the show. But first things first, Tony, as I welcome my co-host Tony Farmer to the show. Did you see that RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has tabbed Aaron Rodgers on his short list to be his running mate as an independent in the 2024 presidential election?
I read that. Absolutely insane. Have we seen an active, not just NFL player, active pro athlete be considered for the card for a presidential election? I don't know what the football implications of this are. Does Aaron Rodgers retire if he's picked? I mean, how can you play a season while campaigning? I mean, November is in the middle of the season. So the football implications of this are odd. And Andrew, I haven't heard anything about that side of it. What happens to Aaron Rodgers, the football player, if he is selected? Have you?
No, nothing. I mean, I just saw this morning. Apparently, it sort of surfaced last night. I had to bring it up. And my question to you, it would be interesting to see if, like, mid-November, if Aaron Rodgers is scratched because he's on the campaign trail or, whatever the case may be. My question to you is, if you, Tony Farmer, were running for president, which athlete, quarterback, pitcher, hockey goalie, whatever, which athlete would you pick as your running mate?
All right, I'm going to go with a couple former athletes here because you need someone really cerebral, someone obviously super intelligent, good under pressure, right? So I'm going to go with Peyton Manning. He's got to be considered, right? Good under pressure, highly intelligent, great leader. And another guy growing up a Red Sox fan, how about Jason Varitek, the captain of the Red Sox team for all those World Series teams? Great leader, highly respected. Both of those guys can command a room. Peyton a little more vocal than Varitek, but both those guys could command a room. I could see him doing great at press conferences. I'm going to go with those two. You got somebody in mind?
Love those picks, by the way. Varitek is a great shout out. My head instantly went to, and there's no other reason just based on his university, but I immediately went to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, this guy is an Ivy League guy. He went to Harvard. You would assume that he's a pretty smart guy, obviously smarter than me, so he's going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting on decision making behind the scenes to fill in where I lack, because I'm not a smart guy. I would make a terrible president. So I would need to lean on a guy like Fitzmagic if I'm on the campaign trail and gunning for president of the United States.
You don't have Antonio Brown on your list?
He's a bit further down. He's on there just for a character play, but not super high up. I got to give a shout out. I just said I wasn't smart, but shout out to me last week. We were doing a little bit of handicapping on the Oscars. I called out the best animated feature category as a potential good betting spot because Oppenheimer was heavy chalk up and down the Oscars board. The Boy and the Heron at around plus 125, plus 130 came through and did win best animated feature. So shout out to Studio Ghibli
nice
there.
Work.
Yeah, man, super proud of that. But Tony, the big news this week, and it has been a flurry of activity starting on Monday, but NFL free agency, a lot of wheeling and dealing here going on in these, first handful of days. Real quick, anybody jumping out to you in terms of a winner and a loser so far?
I definitely like what the Packers have done, but if I had to pick one winner of free agency so far, it's got to be the Texans. I mean, they traded for Joe Mixon. They've got a legit running back now. They retained Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown. I think when we talk about winners of free agency, our tendency is to look at who added guys, but it's a big deal when you retain your stars too and you don't lose them to other teams. So I like that they saved those two guys on their roster. And then even though they added Blake Cashman, a solid linebacker, and Jonathan Grenard, they replaced that talent. They brought in Azeez Al-Shaair, a guy that their defensive coordinator is familiar with, or their head coach is familiar with when he was a defensive coordinator with the 49ers. Danielle Hunter, one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. Guy had 16 and a half sacks last year. On that defense, you figure in Houston, the offense is going to be okay with the quarterback situation they got there. You see that offense improving rapidly. Now you bring in a leader like Danielle Hunter on defense. Love that move. And then how about Danico Autry? You're added to a defensive line that already had Malik Collins, Will Anderson, of course. So that defense is really, really shaping up in Houston. Love what they're doing so far. So people aren't talking about them in terms of the splash moves like the Saquon Barkley, Kirk Cousins, etc., but they are building a team in Houston.
Yeah, love those moves. Saw on Twitter, I can't remember who tweeted it out, but it was alluding to the fact that the Texans ranked so low in the league last year in YAC, in yards after the catch. And Mixon is an immediate solve to that. One of the better running backs in terms of catching the ball and picking up yardage after that first contact. So really positive move there for the Texans.
In terms of a loser, I gotta go with the Vikings here, man. They lose Kirk Cousins. You know, literally one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I don't know where you rank him. I think he's around the top 10 for sure. They lose Kirk Cousins and they lose Danielle Hunter. So you could argue their best player on offense, Justin Jefferson too, of course, but their best player on offense, their best player on defense are now gone. You've got Sam Darnold as your quarterback for now. We'll see what they do in the draft. I think they've got the 8th overall pick or somewhere around there, or 11th. And so that team, if you're a Vikings fan, you're not feeling really great right now with the way this last week is shaped up.
Yeah, one of the biggest losers, certainly the Vikes. One of the biggest winners, though, clearly Sam Darnold. 1 year, $10 million. This dude got paid. But, not looking great there in Minnesota. I do want to talk a little bit about a few of these marquee names that have changed teams, that are moving. And you already alluded to them, but talk to me about Kirk Cousins to the Falcons, now minus 115 to win that NFC South. The team gets a quarterback, like you said, sort of hovering around the top 10 to go around a lot of good skill position players there. Are you buying or selling Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons?
Got to be a Falcons buyer right now. I mean, this is a team. Remember how this division ended last year? You had 3 teams which finished within 2 games of each other. So really, really tight race to finish the season. Of course, the Panthers were out of it, but we had the Saints, Bucks, and Falcons. Really tight race toward the end. And now all of a sudden, the best quarterback in the division, tell me if you disagree, it's Kirk Cousins. I think you got to put him ahead of Baker, even though Baker had a nice season. Got to put him ahead of Derek Carr. And of course, Bryce Young is still developing. So you got 3 teams who are close together in the division. You add a marquee quarterback to that roster. And let's not forget, the Falcons were a team that were some people's darlings heading into last season. If you believed in Desmond Ridder, they were an under-the-radar team that could surprise people. Reason being, they had pieces in place. They have weapons on that offense. They have some pieces on defense. So if people thought they could be an under-the-radar team last season, they haven't lost a whole bunch, and you add Kirk Cousins, Raheem Morris, great pickup for a head coach, in my opinion. You add a defensive head coach to that defense that struggled sometimes. Now you got Kirk Cousins on offense. And let's not forget, Kirk Cousins may have been having his best or second best season last year before he got hurt, statistically at least. 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. This is a big pickup in Atlanta. Not totally surprising. I think we all saw it coming the last week or so, but a huge move.
Yeah, love the move. They also added, it's not a move the needle type signing, but Darnell Mooney gets thrown into the wide receiver depth chart there to go alongside guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, obviously, Bijan Robinson in the backfield. So, minus 115 feels like great value even today with that team to win that NFC South. And you're right, I think Baker had a great year, but Cousins is the number 1 QB in that division. I think the Falcons are definitively a team to look out for next year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Another big name, obviously this broke when we were sitting in our pre-production meeting yesterday. Derrick Henry goes to the Ravens. This is another big one. Obviously Dobbins got hurt in week 1 last season. I think it was. Gus Edwards got the bulk of the snaps and the carries last year. So Henry, a big upgrade at the position. Are you buying or selling the Ravens with now Derrick Henry in the backfield?
I got to buy this one too. Let's not forget last year, the Ravens wanted Derrick Henry at the trade deadline and they couldn't pull it off. So they got their guy. He fits really well into this offense. When Keaton Mitchell went down last season, that really hurt the Ravens' playoff chances. I know they got blown out in their playoff game against the Chiefs, but I still feel like if he's on the field, that's a dynamic weapon. Now, let's assume Mitchell's healthy, and that's no given considering the severity of his leg injury. But if you at some point in the future have a healthy Keaton Mitchell and now you add Derrick Henry. That's a nice thunder and lightning type of situation. If you remember the Ron Dane, Tiki Barber days, those guys have two totally different styles, and I think that could fit really well into that offense. And John Harbaugh could have a lot of fun with that team. Derrick Henry still has a lot in the tank. If you look at his last 3 seasons, he's not the 2,000-yard Derrick Henry, but there's still plenty there. He's averaged about the same yards per carry the last 3 seasons, double-digit touchdowns. He's still got something left.
Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. He's staying in the division, obviously. Eagles plus 135 to win the East. This is an interesting one. Very polarizing player among Giants fans, among Giants Twitter. A lot of fans like him. A lot of fans very unhappy when he was drafted that high. What's your take on this? Buying or selling the Eagles now with Saquon in the backfield in 2024?
I've got to sell the Eagles here. I mean, I know that if I'm an Eagles fan, I get the excitement, obviously. You're bringing a premier running back. But it's interesting because the Eagles front office has always been known for making very astute moves and, value signings and things like that. Almost Moneyball type with football. And now they're spending big money on a running back here who's hurt a lot. And so on a team who's struggled with injuries on offense and defense a lot. So you got the Eagles who also lost 2 huge leaders, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, offense and defensive line. This is a team that finished really bad last season. I know this isn't what happened, but it almost feels like the Eagles finished so terribly last season and the morale is so bad in Philadelphia that you saw the body language on the players. They needed to do something to cheer up the fan base. And I know that wasn't the thinking, but it almost seems like, hey, we need something to boost morale around here. And it probably is accomplishing that.
How many times did Saquon rush for over 100 yards in a game last season?
Last year? 3?
Once.
Wow.
And wow. I know the Giants were not a great football team. But I don't know, man. The position has changed and the perception of the position has changed dramatically over the last 5-10 years. It was against the Jets. It was an overtime game as well. 36 carries he had in that game for 128 yards. I'm with you, though. I'm selling this move. I'm not the biggest Saquon fan. But you're right, calling out, especially Jason Kelce on that O-line now moving on to retirement. That's really the big loss here. But yeah, definitely selling the Eagles in that move. We got to talk about Russ to the Steelers real quick because we both called this one on last week's show as a potential landing spot, and here we are now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So thoughts on this move, and in reality, does this move the needle for the Steelers at all and their outlook for 2024?
Listen, I'm not the biggest Russell Wilson guy, but this is a massive move for the Steelers, not only because they get an adequate quarterback who I believe is an upgrade to that team, but the contract that he signed, the league minimum, is going to help the rest of that roster in terms of free agency spending, salary cap, etc. I mean, this is why the 49ers have such an advantage over the league, because they've got Brock Purdy on a cheap contract and it allows them to spend at other positions. So the Steelers now, who have a lot of high-profile players on offense and defense, really, they've got some weapons. They've got a bargain at the starting quarterback position. And you may hear some stuff in the media. It's not a gimme that Russell Wilson has that starting job. I think he's going to be your starting quarterback at the league minimum. But also, brilliant move by Russell Wilson and his agent to sign that league minimum contract. What am I talking about? Because of the league offset contract rules, the Broncos are going to be paying tens of millions of dollars to Russell Wilson. So what does he care who pays the money? Maybe he wanted to stick it to the Broncos, the team that stuck it to him and said, you need to, readjust your contract in case you get hurt. Okay, you want to mess with my contract? I'm going to mess with your salary cap. And so that was a brilliant move by him. And I've got to think it was intentional by him and his agent.
I would think so, man. This whole soap opera that has been developing there, has been wild. And to put a bow on it with this sort of feather in his cap now as a potential, sort of FU to the Broncos, cherry on top, man, chef's kiss. I am not we said last week that Tomlin might be able to get a little something extra out of this dude. The AFC North is going to be tough. I don't like the Steelers' outlook in 2024. But it's potentially a good spot, and it could be a surprising result, with him there under center, working with some of those weapons that he's got, working with Mike Tomlin. So it'll be interesting to watch that unfold. The way that the quarterback situation post Ben has worked out there has not been pretty, has not been great, but Tomlin wins games regardless. So it'll be interesting to watch this all unfold. Any other changes, any other players moving teams that you want to address before we talk about, we move on here?
Yeah, how about what the Packers did? Retaining Keyshawn Nixon in their secondary, I think is big. And then adding Xavier Kinney. This was a really thin year in terms of safeties in the free agent market, and he was the premier safety out there. And everything that I'm hearing with this draft class coming in is that it's also a thin draft class in terms of safety. So they got a position of need, upgraded their secondary, and kind of like I was talking about with the Texans where I said, we know their offense is going to be okay, and now they're upgrading the defense. You could say the same thing about the Packers here. Jordan Love is improving. That guy's the real deal. They also, by the way, we haven't even talked about this. They just added Josh Jacobs. Lose Aaron Jones. Not a good move in terms of loyalty to your starting running back, but they believe that's an upgrade, obviously, to Josh Jacobs. I think it probably is, too, a little bit of an upgrade. And then with that Xavier McKinney addition on the defense, the Packers are an up-and-coming team. Love what they've done so far, too. We still even have had the draft yet, but any teams, this is a way too early look, but any team out there that could potentially be a big surprise in 2024? I know we've touched on the Texans and the Steelers. I don't know if you can call the Texans a surprise anymore. They made the playoffs last year. But those two teams are certainly on my radar. I wonder about the Giants. Losing Saquon Barkley, sometimes there's an addition by subtraction type thing where, the ball can get spread out a little bit more. I don't know what he was like in the locker room, but they added Brian Burns. Really good veteran on defense. This is a team that nobody has any expectations for whatsoever next year. Now, would I be shocked if the Giants were a bad team again next year? Sure, I wouldn't be shocked, but I think they kind of have a high ceiling, low floor with some of the moves that they're making. Brian Daboll, I don't know what happened to that guy. He went from coach of the year to looking really bad last year. Going to give him the benefit of the doubt. If you get some pieces on the Giants, maybe they could be a team that could surprise some people next year. And in that division as well, how about the Commanders adding Austin Eckler? Eckler looked bad last year. Don't get me wrong. He plummeted statistically, but I'm kind of wondering if some of that had to do with playing, with injuries and stuff. He's not that old. He does, I think, still have some in the tank. And so be interesting to see what the Commanders do going forward. A team that a lot of people have criticized as being, the basketball leadership on that team. They've made a couple astute moves in free agency as well. So NFC East is going to be interesting to watch going forward.
I mean, that's my team that I've picked as being a candidate to potentially surprise is Washington. I mean, you talked about Eckler, but for me, Frankie Louvu is a big addition there. Really good inside linebacker, and Dan Quinn can potentially take this guy to another level. And the offensive line they addressed, the interior spots there. They got the center from Dallas. They got Allegretti at guard. Zach Ertz is in the mix now. Still on the outside looking in that division. But I think they made some really nice moves. It's been a great start. And what did they win? 4 games last year? 4-13? What they've done so far sort of points to a team that, they're still on the outside looking in, like I said, but 7 wins, 8 wins, and they draft what? 3rd? What if you add a Marvin Harrison Jr.? You gotta stick with Sam Howell again if you don't want to take, or no, they picked 2, I think. Jaden Daniels in the mix there as well, but some interesting possibilities there with Washington. And then one of the disappointing ones I had, and maybe this is more of a team that has sort of had a poor start to free agency, but I think the Panthers have had a disappointing start. The Brian Burns trade, which you mentioned to the Giants, has been a bit of a laughingstock. As a result, it's been well documented that the Rams actually offered them 2 firsts at the 2022 trade deadline for Burns, and they declined. So now they trade him and a 5th for a 2nd and 2 fifth-round picks. They did add Deontay Johnson, I saw, and that's nice, but not a great offseason start there for the Panthers.
Yeah, what's your take on Bryce Young, man? Like, he's just not passing the eyeball test for me. I don't want to be that guy that gives up on a rookie quarterback after only 1 season, but if I'm a free agent wide receiver, do I want to come to Carolina and have him as my quarterback? He actually had a couple of weapons on that offense last year. Some people may disagree with me, but they had a couple okay wide receivers and just no production. Really cringy to watch him play last year. My expectations for him are just in the tank.
Yeah, not great. Obviously, not a great rookie season. Not a great season for the Panthers, like full stop. Like, this was a team, you mentioned, they had some pieces. They had a pretty good defense, but I mean, they could not grind out wins. Really tough start. But I'm like you. Like, I don't think you throw out a rookie QB after year 1. You got to give these guys a bit of a leash here. You know, not everybody's CJ Stroud. You got to give Bryce another year. And even for me with Washington, like, give Sam Howell some more snaps. Give him some more games. I think there's a QB there. So we'll see what happens. But my outlook for the Panthers is not great. So we'll have to see what happens.
Give me a potential stat line. Let's say Bryce Young plays the whole season. Let's assume he's healthy. How many touchdowns and how many interceptions for Bryce Young next year?
Well, I mean, oh man, that's tough. So let's say, okay, 17 games. You know, would 21 touchdowns and 16 picks, is that a step in the right direction for him?
I could see it. I'm wondering if 21 touchdowns might be generous. I really am. I'm just so down on this guy. But I think you're right with the 16 picks. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. He's young, man. He's obviously young. So could he come out and throw 30 touchdowns and make us both look terrible? Conceivable, but I just don't see it happen.
He had 11 and 10 last year. So if he gets to 20 touchdowns, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, agreed. I agreed it'll be a step in the right direction. It's just hard for me to see it, man. It really is.
He went, let's see here, 59.8 completion percentage. I mean, you know, 2,800 yards. It's not gret, man.
And even numbers aside, just the eyeball test, because he just looks overwhelmed. You like, there are quarterbacks when they struggle in their rookie year, you can kind of see the flashes on the tape, and you're like, yeah, he's getting sacked a lot, he's making a couple bad decisions, but look at that throw. There's something to hang on to, and I'm not seeing it with him. Yeah,
for sure. Producer Steve just got my ear. They did address some offensive line issues as well. But still, a lot of work to do for both the Panthers and Bryce Young. A lot of work to do for bettors with March Madness fast approaching. But obviously, it's conference tournament time now. Like, some of the smaller conferences had started up on last week's show. You had sort of called out a couple teams. Give the folks at home a refresher. Who are those teams? And give us an update. Like, how are they doing?
Yeah, Weber State disappointed. That was ugly. Okay. Not my best effort there. They won their first game and then bounced out in pretty ugly fashion. Looking forward here, the ACC, we've got UNC and Duke. UNC plus 150 to win the conference tournament. Duke plus 155. These two teams are 7th and 8th in the Ken Pom rankings, and they just played Saturday. UNC won by 5, so that's going to be fun to watch. To see how the ACC breaks down. Probably the most competitive conference in terms of the tournament and how it's going to shake out here. How about the SEC? We've got Tennessee as the favorites, plus 140. Auburn, plus 260. Really strong team in Auburn. Kentucky, plus 400. Alabama, plus 450. So you've got four really good teams that have a shot. Breakdown of the Big Ten. Purdue is obviously the favorite here. They're first in adjusted offensive efficiency, 20th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Really good team. And then Illinois is plus 300 there. Nebraska's plus 700. So Purdue's the big favorite in the Big Ten. Big 12, Houston, obviously the big favorite. I don't like Iowa State at plus 330. I think that team's a bit fraudulent. Baylor at plus 550. Maybe you could get me to take a look at, but it's tough to bet against Houston there in the Big 12. And then in the Pac-12, Arizona's the big favorite, minus 155. And we've got Colorado and Washington both at plus 500. Anything stick out for you there, Andrew, in terms of any of those dogs you might be willing to throw a little sprinkle on or even take some of these favorites at a value?
Well, you mentioned Bama. I'm seeing their name get kicked around a lot in terms of not just in the SEC, not just in conference tournament play, but potentially when the tournament starts, that this is a team that has live dog potential. So Bama for me is the one. You called them out there at, what were they, plus 400-ish? Plus 450 to win the SEC, but that's a team to keep an eye on both throughout the SEC tourney and March Madness as well. I know you lean on KenPom, and a lot of college basketball bettors do and should. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is there anybody, that fits the sort of, top 25 in adjusted offensive efficiency or adjusted defensive efficiency that could be an under the radar sort of team to look at come March Madness? Is there anybody that fits that, ranking highly but still a bit under the radar?
Yeah, I think a team like Marquette, a team that is top 20 in adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. This is a, I don't want to say a secret, but this is kind of an open secret now in the betting industry, that if you can get a team that's in the top 20, top 25 in KenPom in both of those two categories, you're in good shape. And for new listeners out there, adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency obviously ranks the offense and defense, but it takes into account strength of schedule. So if if you blow out a team with a really bad defense, you're not going to get as much credit for that in the end result of these statistics as if you blow out a team that has a really stout defense. So a team like that, Marquette's not exactly under the radar, but in terms of, they look really good in the rankings. They're one of 6 teams that are in the top 20 in both that offensive and defensive category. Couple of the teams that are on the outside of that formula looking in terms of being in the top 20, Tennessee, Duke, and Creighton. Tennessee has the 25th ranked offense, Duke 22nd ranked defense, and Creighton 21st ranked defense. So we've got 6 to 9 teams that are fitting that formula that a lot of sharp bettors like, when the offense and defensive efficiency are both in the top 20.
Yeah, that's definitely something to pay attention to as we get closer to tournament time. And with March Madness fast approaching, obviously, Tony, one of the biggest parts is filling out your March Madness bracket. But maybe there are folks out there that have never done it, or maybe there's folks out there that are just hardly even casual college basketball fans who may be looking for some insight to win their bracket at their office or among friends or what have you. So talk to those folks for a sec. Any words of wisdom on filling out a bracket and things that you've learned down the years?
So I'd say for the super casual folks who are just working in an office and don't know anything, one, keep in mind, you probably don't want to take a Cinderella team to win it all. Like a 10 seed or a 12 seed or something like that. Even if it's your alma mater, it's the school that you went to, it's not a good idea. The worst ranked seed that's ever won the national championship was an 8th ranked seed. We have had an 11 in the Final Four. Outside of that, it's super, super rare. So I would say have your bracket finish with some really strong seeds. And when I talk about the seeding, the lower numbers on your bracket for beginners out there, the lower numbers, the 1 seeds, the 2 seeds are the stronger teams. So you probably want to have some of them towards the end. Don't get too cute. I would also keep in mind the point system that your pool has, right? So a lot of them have like 1 or 2 points for first round wins. And then by the time you get to the final round, you're getting double-digit points. So keep that in mind as well, that typically the later you go on in your tournament, you're getting more points awarded. But always know the rules for your pools. People are getting creative now. There's a lot of pools out there where you'll get more points for an upset. And obviously in those kind of pools, you'll want to take more risks. So certainly keep that in mind. For folks that are a little bit more seasoned and have been doing the March Madness betting for a while, keep in mind the size of your pool is absolutely crucial, right? The bigger the pool with thousands of people in it, you're going to need to take more chances. You're going to need to take more shots on underdogs in order to win that pool. And you will want to be a little more chalky when it's a smaller pool. I'll tell you a story real quick. I was working, not in the gambling industry. I was working in an office setting, and I had a guy, hey, let's throw $100 on a pool. All right, so let's throw $100 on this pool. We're each going to fill out a bracket. And I filled out my bracket, and it was a pretty chalky bracket. And he gave me so much crap the following week. Tony, he's telling all my colleagues, I bet Tony $100. He handed me this chalk bracket. Well, when it's one-on-one and it's just you against another person, that's good business to have a chalky bracket. And at that time in my life, $100 was worth a lot more to me than it is now. So that was a good business move. So again, bigger the bracket, more people in the field, take more chances. That's a good strategy for survivor pools as well. Another thing to keep in mind for people that are a little more seasoned out there, when you're picking who can go all the way, and as we said, that's really important because you're going to get more points for those later rounds. I like a team that has good senior leadership on the roster. I like a head coach that's been there before. And then again, that formula of who ranks highly in the Ken Pom offensive and defensive efficiencies. That's huge. I like pulling in the Bart Torvik ratings a little bit and seeing who's been playing well lately. Right? So Ken Pom might have a team ranked top 10, but in the last month, they're actually 21st or 22nd ranked, according to Bart Torvik. So keep that in mind as well. And then, this is a little bit outside of filling out the bracket, but we should talk about, Andrew, the rollover method of if you're going to take a team to win the entire tournament, consider the rollover method. Now, this didn't work last year for UConn. Right? If you did the rollover method last year, it wasn't as profitable as if you had just picked them as a favorite to win the tournament. But in short, the rollover method for your consideration out there, folks, is instead of taking a team, Alabama, to win the whole thing, great odds, you could bet them in the first round, take the winnings from that first round win, the winnings and your original bet, which you'll get back, put that total combined into the second round and follow that all the way through. And often, but not always, that ends up being more profitable than just taking the future bet outright.
Is that something that you've personally tried when March Madness rolls around? If you hitch your wagon to, school X, is that rollover method something that you apply?
Yeah, it's something that everybody should consider. More recently, in the last couple of years, it's become more well known. And so, yeah, it's something that I've tried. Again, not so good with UConn last year, but it's absolutely worth consideration for sure.
Then next week on the show, once we know the bracket, let's pick a team and we'll apply the rollover method throughout the tournament, and we'll see where we end up.
I love it. That's a great idea. I love it.
Right?
I love it.
Speaking of all that kind of stuff, we will be going live on X Spaces, Twitter Spaces, throughout the tournament, starting on Selection Sunday. So Sunday night, actually, former old friend of Oddshark and friend of the show, Ian McMillan, will be joining us, and we're going to have great guests throughout March Madness. We're going to have Ben Fox, we're going to have Will Hill, we're going to have Danny Burke, and many, many more throughout. We're looking to go 11:30 a.m. Eastern on X Spaces, so follow us at Oddshark. And we'll basically just be looking at the day's board. We can, recap the prior day, what happened, in the round of 64, talk about the day's board, talk about some bets, talk about trends that we're seeing develop throughout the tournament. But that'll be every game day, 11:30 Eastern. Me, Tony, and special guests throughout. So join us for that. And next week, right here on the Huddle, Ian McMillan will be joining us to talk all things March Madness and all things college basketball. So keep it locked with us here at Oddshark for all things that you need come March Madness. And one of the biggest news items of the week, Tony, is Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Jake will go, this fight will go down at Jerry World in Arlington, Texas. They are expecting a sellout crowd. It's going to be streamed on Netflix on July 20th. Tony, will you be tuning in for this?
I probably will, but I hate to admit it. So this fight to me, Andrew, have you ever been scrolling on social media and you come across like a reel and it's obviously fake? They're bad actors and they're just trying to go viral and you know it's fake and you're watching it and you just can't look away even though you know it's fake. And then maybe you have a little bit of shame and you're like, gosh, I know this is fake, but I've been watching this for 2.5 minutes. I can't turn it off. That's kind of how I feel a little bit about this fight. I'm falling for it, but Tyson's in his 50s. I'm curious what the guy looks like, okay? I'm curious if he can take a punch. I'm curious if he can throw a punch. So I'm probably going to watch out of curiosity, but I hate myself for wanting to watch.
Mike Tyson, 57, will be 58 when this fight goes down. I think Jake Paul is 30 years younger. Jake Paul is minus 210. Mike Tyson plus 160. You're right. This is just purely for show. Their Jake Paul's promotional company is putting this thing on. Not something that I'm looking to bet. But there has been line movement. Like I thought Tyson was a much bigger underdog when lines got hung for this. So that's been interesting. Like around plus 300. I've seen even lower, to be honest. But weird, wild stuff. I will probably tune in as well. These celebrity boxing things, especially with Jake Paul, are so weird to me. Like there's to me, it's obviously a staged event. Like on paper, there's no way Jake Paul beats Mike Tyson, 30 years younger or not. But I feel like this is going to be rigged in his favor, right? Like that's the way these things go down.
Well, so you like Jake Paul to lose to Tyson?
No, I like Jake Paul to win. Jake Paul is going to win this thing. I would like to see. I'd like to see Mike Tyson, box, and we've seen some sparring clips of him doing the rounds, but we don't know when these were filmed. We don't know how long he was in the ring sparring. You can do it for 10 seconds. But over the course of a few rounds, it's a different beast. There's weird rules about it. Like I saw reports that they're going to wear a headgear for this thing. So, I don't know, man. It's a whole weird thing. Like celebrity boxing, what a time to be alive.
I agree with you on not wanting to bet it because it could very well be fixed and rigged. But let's take that. Let's say for a second, let's assume for a second it is rigged, and we don't know that it is, right? It may not be, but let's assume for a second it is. What's the script? How would they rig it to protect Mike and his 58-year-old body? Let's not hit Mike too hard. Would Jake Paul be willing to lose to a 58-year-old, and would his ego be okay with that? So what would the script be if it were not a legit fight?
The script is people keep tuning in, and I know this is on Netflix, and I don't think you have to pay anything additional to watch the fight, but people keep buying and viewing these things to, in my opinion, watch Jake Paul lose. So as long as he keeps winning, then they will have the next one against a potentially bigger name or whatever. And this is the one where he's going to lose. I'm going to tune in. I'm going to watch this. That's the way the script goes. And they can offer Mike Tyson a decent sum of money to take a fall, to take a dive, or not box him, just to stand in the ring, take a couple shots, do some footwork, do, whatever. Make it look like he's trying, but in actuality, he's not. But that's the script, in my opinion. What about you?
Well, I think that you brought up an interesting point. This is Netflix, and correct me if I'm wrong. I may be out of the pop culture loop and out of the Netflix loop. Is this the first time they've done this? Like a live event on Netflix? Is this a new thing for them?
Not the first. They have dipped their toe into they did I think it was last year, they did an F1 / golf tournament. So F1 drivers and golfers were participating in this 18-hole golf event. They streamed that live. So Netflix is actively dipping their toe into live sports. And so this is just the next step for them.
All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to reach over, I'm going to get my tinfoil hat, and I'm going to put it on here. Yeah. And I'm going to say, if that's the case, I don't think Netflix wants this to be a short fight. I don't think Netflix wants to see Mike Tyson get knocked out in the first 30 seconds and have all these people tune in for this newish technology that they're using and then have the fight last a very short amount of time.
Yep.
So I would say the script is for a longer fight.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So.
They definitely don't I don't know if there's going to be any sort of undercard on this thing, but if it's just people tuning in for the ring walk for Jake Paul and Mike Tyson and then watching the fight, they're going to want it to go. I don't know how many rounds this thing is for, 8, 10, 12. Surely it's not 12, but they're going to want to see it go the distance. And that'll be part of the script.
Are we in the minority here, Andrew? Are you you and I are on the same page? This thing, generally, I don't talk to a lot of people about boxing on a regular basis, so I may be out of the loop here. I wonder if we put a poll out on Twitter or something. Is this fight rigged, yes or no? What would be your prediction there? Do you think most people would agree that this is a little nefarious, or are we in the minority?
So it's an interesting question. I know that the kids way younger than me, I'm a dude in my 40s. I potentially have a bit of a cynical outlook on things, but there is a younger generation that has really latched on to both Paul brothers as YouTube creators and now as boxers, as fighters, and to their credit, they do have a little bit of skill in the ring. I'll give them that. So I would say that we would see something close to a 50-50 split, 55-45 either way is what I would potentially expect.
Because you'd think the Paul supporters would say, no, it's not rigged. They're just
it's
really
legit.
Good.
This is a dude that has worked hard to get here, to get to this point, to be able to have boxing events. And to his credit, there's been times in the ring where I've looked at the guy and I was like, yep, clearly he's got some footwork. Clearly he knows how to throw an array of punches. But, when you're getting into the ring with, a Mike Tyson or retired UFC guys or whoever else he's gotten in the ring with, I don't know, man. It looks to me on paper that he should be losing these fights. That's all I'm saying.
Got it. It's gonna be interesting. I was about to say it's gonna be fun to see, but I don't know how much fun. It'll be interesting. It'll satisfy the curiosity itch. That's for sure.
It's just sad for me as somebody who still watches boxing. I grew up watching the fights. The De La Hoya. My God, I can go back to Hitman Hearns and stuff like that. Is that now the bigger fights are these ones, and it's not the ones that deserve to be a Terrence Crawford fight or a Lomachenko fight or whatever. The biggest ones are now Jake Paul fighting, whomever. And that's what's depressing for me. But boxing has done this to itself, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I did see a funny meme out there. It said, before Jake Paul is able to fight Mike Tyson, he has to face Glass Kid Joe, King Hippo, and it went through all the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out characters from Nintendo with all their photos up there. Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever, whoever created that.
Soda Popinski, yeah, classic. We got to wrap things up here. No picks today, by the way. We're in the lab, as it were, trying to get prep for college basketball and next week's show. But just a note here from myself on the Premier League this weekend. Only 4 games going, with this also being an FA Cup weekend. So 6 Premier League games have been postponed. Not the most exciting board, admittedly, this weekend with Burnley hosting Brentford, Luton hosting Nottingham Forest, Spurs are at Fulham, and Aston Villa at West Ham. I'll be looking at goals in that Burnley-Brentford game. Over 2.5/3 is -110. Brentford has underperformed XG by almost 8 goals so far this season. So even something like Brentford over 1.5 at around even money is some decent value. I'd stay away from the Fulham-Tottenham game. The game of the weekend potentially could be Luton against Forest. There have been 21 goals scored in Luton's last 5 home games. I think they have a puncher's chance in this one as well. +170 on the 3-way money line there. But it should be noted that Luton actually plays later today, Wednesday afternoon. So don't make any bets until we see the outcome, especially with player health and whatnot as a result of that game. Before we do leave, though, Tony, did you see that Debo is changing his jersey number?
I saw that jersey number 1. I like that. By the way, with your recap of the Premier League, I'm glad I know what you mean when you say FA Cup now. I know what that means. That's exciting.
There you go, man.
You're educating me on Premier League soccer, so I like that.
Yep. Your club, Everton, their game is postponed this weekend. Their Premier League game postponed this weekend. So we'll see what happens to them. That's all I got for this week here on the Huddle, folks. Like I said, next week we will be joined by Ian McMillan. to talk all things March Madness. And we will be going live starting Sunday, right after Selection Sunday. So turn those notifications on at OddsShark on X. And me, Tony, and Ian will be talking about the bracket that has developed and evolved as we watch Selection Sunday. So keep it locked with us at OddsShark. We've got everything you need to help you bet March Madness. We'll see you next week right here on The Huddle.